What's more important, and this is full spoilers for season 3 of White Lotus, there's no way around this, but this is like the actual crux of the whole show right here. But what's more important, this or this? On the level of text, where the show provides its own interpretation of itself, it's this. Walter Goggins' character Rick finds bliss or serenity in the afterlife alongside his partner Chelsea, having finally broken himself free from his father, which has been the antagonism that's kept him from living a normal life. Has been his whole deadlock this whole time. We break from it, but we can't go on and live a normal life afterwards. We aren't free to love the person who's standing in front of us saying, I'm here, I love you, let's just be happy. The only way of breaking free from your situation is through death and reincarnation. So dialectics is only possible when you stage it again in a new life. And so, he falls into the lily pad pond alongside his slain wife. It's like a Bonnie and Clyde situation. And we immediately cut to the other character of the show, Lachlan, who's just had a near-death experience, and he's coming back alive with his eye opening. So it's a direct image of reincarnation. And we've got this image of the water droplet falling back into the pond, and this is what our one being is, where we're going back in, we're starting all over again. There's serenity in that. So the love that is possible is phantasmatically on the other side of all of this. That's what structures things. You can't have a revolution in who you are. It has to be this spectral version of it, this other side of things. And we see, Rick and Chelsea being carted away in body bags, enjoying that being carted away in body bags, like the idea of this spectral idea of a life where you're finally free of what kept you from living life in the first place, but only achieving that in death, or again, phantasmatically, like this virtual structure. And this reincarnation gets laid on top of all of the other new leases on life of the characters of the show. But for most of these, for Gaitok and Belinda, we have material improvements. We've gained what we desired at the cost of spiritual degradation, at the cost of doing something horrible, of murdering someone, of giving over our own freedom, of going along with a murder. So they leave with smiles on their faces, having gained everything they want, but spiritually, they're much worse off. The only alternative, the only positive outcome for the rest of the show is with Timothy Ratliff, who finally finds a way to accept the loss of his identity. So Timothy is a wealthy financial advisor who goes on vacation and immediately finds out that he's being investigated for fraud, for money laundering, and he loses everything while he's on vacation, and he spends the entire show, basically confronting the loss of himself and the yearning to end his own life and end his family's life as well, because his whole family can't suffer the intense loss of their identity either. So he wants to protect them from that suffering, which is a very Buddhist stance. You have to push the suffering back. So how do you confront having nothing, in terms of identity? And while we get a classic Anna Karenina version of stopping in the last moment as you're about to poison your own family and realizing you must keep living even though you don't want to live your own life, that step brings us to the one person you were trying to spare, Lockie, unintentionally poisoning himself and almost dying, and then you resurrect him and you get him in your arms, and that gives you the energy really to say, okay, we're just going to go back home and our life's going to be completely different, and we're all just going to have to restart our lives with nothing, whatever that entails. So that's the happy ending with Timothy being able to actually stop protecting his family from the suffering of their loss of identity and just to embrace it. But the interesting thing is his children have already undergone this transformation themselves on the trip, and in both cases it's quite heartening. His douchebag son learns not to be a douchebag through seeing his own position through as a douchebag, basically. He becomes a full subject, someone who's able to have honest depth. And his daughter, who thought that, she had to interpret the insight of Buddhism, that there is no self, etc., that it obligated her to become an ascetic and, go spend a year in Thailand at a monastery in ascetic conditions. And she realizes that fetishism isn't her fantasy after all. It doesn't work on her. So she's able to go back home as a normal American Buddhist, basically. She's not she's honestly a boring character. She doesn't have any ways in which she's very askew. And, it's just the simple insight that, no, I don't have to give up everything and meditate nonstop. That's not the response I have to have in life. And so the whole Ratliff family is able to show that there's a transformation of self that's possible through radically losing your wealth. So the non-wealthy workers of the hotel get wealthy, and the wealthy family loses their material possessions, basically, but they're the ones who are much better off. They're the ones who know how to live life, and they've gained their subjectivity while the others have lost it. But what we get with Rick in his final moment is a clear depiction of the very important gulf between Buddhism and psychoanalysis as philosophies, where both share the insight of the void inherent to ourselves, our identity being this staging. There's an intense alienation between us and our identities, the ways in which desire is unfulfilling, with very different responses to what we do with that. But what we're getting here is death drive. Death drive is a drive, like again, sucking your thumb, enjoying a cycle of for its own sake, not for what you get out of it, not the object. So the drive here is him walking, into infinity with his slain partner. Drive here supersedes life. Is a way in which we shrug off all of what's good for ourselves. So that entails both self-sabotage, where we put the wheel into the spokes of our own bicycle. We create an impediment in order to keep this drive loop going. So there's Rick self-sabotaging his relationship with Chelsea, basically. But there's also the less than life aspect as well, where it's not just a transcendence of life, it's an inability to die, an inability to lie down and die. So Rick also has nothing to live for without Chelsea and without his antagonism with his father that defined his whole life. So the question of what is Rick's life here is really nebulous. You can't really imagine much of a life that would happen if he doesn't get shot and falls down into the lily pad pond. But that's not what matters. He's enjoying this drive that we get here. And that's the very thing that puts the smile on his face as he falls down dead. That smile is not death. That smile is your last moment of life. You have to live into your last moments. That's still life. That's where death drive really kicks in, where we just do it to do it asephalically, ethically. So that's the thing that Buddhism is closed off from. Buddhism says, Buddhism doesn't really have room for death drive. We just restart things with reincarnation. So at the level of text, we're being told to focus on that smile as that, okay, now we get this nice image of reincarnation and we can just kind of hold on to that as we leave the show behind. But the most important moment of the whole show is this walking with his wife. That's the thing to hold on to. We have to ask ourselves, how do you live through that moment? And what is that? And the fact that it is this less than life thing too, that's unsettling, is important. It's much more comforting to think of the water droplet falling into the pool and, just putting off the burden of restarting your life again into that. But to get there, we have to fall into death drive. Death drive, so dialectically, when we're seeing our own position through, and to the point where we change our relation towards our very own position, that's a falling into death drive. You have to fall into death drive to get to that point. And so that's what we get with Rick, and that's what we get with Timothy Ratliff, with his whole morbid, I need to end my own life fascination that defines the character throughout the entire show. Where does that point take us? That morbid, I can't live finally breaks to, I guess I can live, or if you call this living. Again, with that whole family, that's how death drive opens up to the whole family. It's possible in both directions, in one's last moments or what's on the other side of life without everything that defines who you are. And that is the defining aspect of death drive in Where We've Made It Dark. Where We've Made It Dark is a zombie apocalypse that takes away everything of the world radically. Not the things that we hold ourselves back from losing in the zombie apocalypse, like family, like even ethics, or just this last little bastion. If you ask yourself, if the zombie apocalypse happened, what would I be? That what would I be is the thing you lose. That's the thing that apocalypse fiction in general really is a privileged site of enjoying and digging into. But that's where philosophy and apocalyptic fiction coincides. So that's why death drive is the core thing, is the thing to be looking at, this radical loss of self and how you keep living having lost yourself radically. It's not about fantasizing this virtual endpoint of what you are on the other side. It's the drive of just not having that at all, being radically open to the world. So from that point, you do build a new life. You do restart who you are subjectively, but maybe you don't. Maybe life ends tragically right before then. Doesn't matter. You're intensely human, and you're accessing infinity through your own psychic experience in either case. So that is the huge, deep psychoanalytic insight of White Lotus Season 3, and it's a lovely show. Please comment if you want me to dig into the other 2 seasons. Thanks so much for watching and for liking and subscribing. If you also want to support my work, please take a look at my literary zombie apocalypse, Where We've Made It Dark. There's a link in the description below.